What is education, and why is education important? Is it important? After all, what's the real purpose of getting educated about anything? We so frequently take education and the process for learning in general totally for granted. Not only that, but the ways in which we think. How we've gone about structuring our own consciousness itself has largely remained unchanged for a long, long time. So how do we literally change our minds? Can we reconfigure our own ways of thinking? And if so, how? Join Dr. Joseph Atman, the founder of one of the world's most revolutionary educational centers, Middletree, and award-winning broadcaster Tammy Trujillo for Educate Everyone, and explore the mysteries of our own consciousness and the education we implement in order for it to be what it is.
And our guest on this episode of Educate Everyone is Dr. Dane Sawyer. He's a professor of religion and philosophy at the University of La Verne in Southern California. Dr. Sawyer has over 25 years of experience and leadership within urban education systems and professional associations. He's guided and supported new and transitioning leaders to serve confidently with clear and aligned purpose and action.
Dane, can you just tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, my background is actually pretty far-reaching, so our conversation could go in lots of different directions today. I think I'll start with my academic background. So I am an instructor for the philosophy and religious studies department, as well as the honors department for the University of La Verne, where I've been teaching since 2007. I have also taught at the Claremont colleges. I've taught there for about a decade, most times maybe about once a year for Pitzer College. Also taught for Claremont McKenna College at least once in their religion department, and also have taught at California Lutheran University there as well. So yeah, I've been teaching since 2007 at the college level, but I also run at La Verne what is known as the Freshman La Verne Experience. I'm the lead for that. And roughly what that is for every incoming freshman student, we coordinate a pair of classes that all the incoming students take. So you would have like all of the same students in like two different classes. And the idea there is to help create a sense of belonging, to introduce students to the liberal arts education where they do interdisciplinary work between different kinds of disciplines and courses. We try to introduce students to things like foundations of academic success, and then try to introduce the students to the core values of the university. So every year we have about 30 plus communities that I organize, bringing together full-time and part-time faculty members. I also teach in the program and I've taught in it for about 10 years as well. So that's another thing I do at La Verne. I also actually have a summer program called the Summer La Verne Experience, which I also organize and have done for about the last 3 or 4 years there as well. So, have my feet both in the teaching and a bit of the administrative stuff at La Verne. But as you know, in my place with doing stuff with Middletree, I've also worked with one of our co-friends and colleagues, Garth Robertson, for GR counseling, where I've done a lot of college mentoring and stuff like that, helping students with undergrad and graduate applications, and did some work for you with Middletree early on when you guys were just getting things started and were just little babies and almost toddlers walking around trying to get all that stuff going. And it is amazing to see how much you all have grown and developed there. So that's a bit on the academic side in terms of my expertise, but you and I share a love and experience with music and our own academic interests as well too.
There's a lot of different ways that we can take this. And so I'm trying to think of where should we start? But I think I'll start with asking you about just the experience, because you have been in the college, in higher academia, and especially on the teaching end of it for so long, since 2007. That's a long time. It's coming up on 20 years, which is crazy to think about. So what's been your experience with that? Because you've gone from where you're at now, talk about crazy growth, and running all these different programs, but you started out as just an adjunct and you did that for a long, long time. So can you tell us about your experience on the teaching end within higher academia?
For sure. So first, I wanted to know for sure that this is actually what I wanted to do. So I got my master's over at the Claremont School of Theology in philosophy of religion and theology. And then I took a year off to do teaching, and before I decided to apply to graduate programs, and just to see, because this is the route I'm going down, and is this what I want to do? And I fell in love with it. And my mother was a teacher, and I remember at one time she said she thought I could really imagine you being like a teacher and loving it. And, as sometimes happens, like I didn't really believe her at the time. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. But I got in the classroom and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And I realized, okay, this is great. I can keep going down this for another, 4 or 5 years until I finish the PhD. And then I can start teaching. But I actually did teach in undergrad as an adjunct while I was doing my PhD work. What is it like? I really particularly love that traditional undergraduate age, that, 18 to 22 roughly student. And there's something about them. They want to do something with their lives. They don't know what it is. There's sometimes their energy is a little bit quiet, but as soon as you get it going, you can tell they're just excited about doing something, making a change, but they don't know what it is or how to do it. And so me, with philosophy, I just introducing them to different ways of thinking, or how they can live their life, or how they can rethink things that they've always taken for granted growing up. Immediately, I fell in love with it. And I'm still in love with it, even though students and the challenges and strengths and, issues that they've dealt with have changed since I started in 2007, and obviously these last 5 years coming out of the COVID pandemic created all kinds of new interesting challenges. But I generally find that students are still interested. They are still passionate, even when sometimes I have to find different ways to engage with them to get them to that spot. But it's always there. So I knew I wanted to do it, and I'm very happy to do it. And that's why I continue to do it 20 years later. Otherwise, I would have just done something else completely.
Well, and like for you personally, though, what's the experience been like? Because again, you had been an adjunct for so long. It was a long and arduous climb to do the things that you're currently doing. What was that like? And for those who are thinking of getting into education at the professorial level, again, I have a lot of folks who come to me and, when I ask them what they want to do, right? Because just as you mentioned, there's a lot of energy at that age that you have to kind of irk out of people. And when I have conversations with folks who are that age, frequently I'll ask them what they want to do, and them knowing my background will say, I might want to get my doctorate degree and teach. And again, I just don't think that everybody knows about what all that entails. So given that you've run the gamut from every angle, can you give people some insight as to what the process is and your just overall experience within it?
I'll say it's been definitely more complicated than I had imagined. I also played high school and college sports. I was a college athlete. I played men's basketball in college at the University of La Verne, where I'm currently teaching. And so I kind of had this attitude that if I just worked hard, people would recognize my hard work, and I would just, get a great job, and people would just see how great I am and how disciplined I am and how sociable I am and all that kind of stuff. And in a way, that's how I got myself into college athletics, just sheer hard work. Of course, I had athleticism and stuff like that to help me along the way, but being sociable and working hard was what kind of got me there. So I took that same attitude with academia, but I did realize, as you said, I've been an adjunct for a long time. It's actually I'm starting my 4th year this fall as a full-time faculty member. So, I did roughly 15 years of adjuncting. And that's one of the reasons why, when I started talking earlier, I had so many things on my resume, was really just trying to make a living. So trying to make a living around doing things like tutoring or test prep or college mentorship, alongside teaching 2 or 3 courses at different colleges and places throughout a semester to help bring in enough finances. So that was definitely challenging. What I will say is that after I got my PhD, that is really when doors started to open. So there is something in higher academia that once you get the PhD, it does help open up doors in terms of my being able to get teaching positions and things like that. And yet at the same time, I applied for many, many positions after finishing my PhD. And it was one of those cases where I got rejected from the majority of them along the way. I would sometimes make it to the top 10, but not the top 5. I would get past the top 10 and the top 5, but wouldn't make it to the top 3 to do the on-campus interview. I would make it to the top 3 to do the on-campus interview, but not the top 2 coming back. And, that happened over and over and over again. And yeah, that certainly was discouraging along the way. But I've always loved teaching, and La Verne, I think, knew that I was of value to the institution, not only as a teacher, but also as someone who actually could do some leadership stuff. And so eventually along the way, and when things started to change and shift, I was able to carve out a nice niche for myself there, because I had been getting really good teaching evaluations, and a lot of people recognized my hard work and stuff like that. In short, not easy. If I was giving advice to someone thinking about going To get a doctorate degree, I would say something like make sure that you really do care about the stuff that you're studying, that you can imagine yourself actually studying that and writing on it and researching on it. And just to recognize that there are more people with PhDs than there are positions out there. So I was able to stay in Southern California where I wanted to be, but realistically, if you wanted a full-time tenure track position, you might be finding yourself in Minnesota or Rhode Island or Florida or Colorado or anywhere, because the positions tend to be focused in a way that they aren't for other kinds of jobs. In fact, people sometimes don't even understand what it means to try to get a job in higher ed, because it's not like you're just looking to just get a position. We're looking for a person who studies French philosophy from, 1950 to the year 2000. And we want someone that only does that. And then clearly your resume has to show that you're a perfect expert in that. Otherwise, there's no way you're going to get that job. So it's a different kind of niche as well.
Well, full disclosure to everybody, we were in grad school together doing the philosophy, religion, and theology program. Were we both at the PhD program at the same time? I started in 2007.
I got my master's in 2007, and then I started 2008, the following year.
In PRT. Okay. Mm-hmm. So and that's how we know one another. We do have a similar journey up to a point and then we've gone totally different directions. But I did have a similar experience. When I finished and when I submitted my dissertation, was ready to get out into the workforce, I came up against similar blockades that you've described. And we were all kind of bewildered with your journey, because you are the kind of professor that any university would want to hire. You're charismatic, you're affable, you know your stuff. And so it was like, gosh, if Dane can't land a position right away, like, what's this going to be like for us? And a couple of us were kind of thinking that. And you had a lot more teaching experience than we did at the time, like a lot more, because you wisely started in 2007 teaching, where when I got to Claremont, I was like, I had just come from teaching for a couple of years and I wanted to just focus on being a student for a little while, because I figured, well, I've got the rest of my career to teach. And then the Great Recession happened, and then a lot of things changed in higher academia after that. And it used to be that if you were a student in the religion department, like, you could just kind of walk into an adjunct. And again, for me, I chose not to do that. You were teaching the whole time. So I guess when I was ready to get out there and look for tenure track gigs, I was looking around at people that we knew who were on a similar sort of path. But you had the most experience out of all of us, because you had taught right from the jump and consistently, and that you had a difficult time, and that you're so good at what you do. And I'm biased, but there's a lot of objective truth to what I'm saying as well. So that Harvard didn't call you right away was like kind of a bellwether, like just something that for me gave me some pause. And I was like, okay, let me take a look at this, because like you mentioned, there are more PhDs out there than there are positions available. And then frequently what departments are looking for is something very niche. They want a well-rounded department. It's just like putting any team together, right? You got to have a shortstop and an outfielder and a pitcher. And, so if they've already got two shortstops, they want to kind of diversify themselves. And a lot of people don't realize that. And so it's not necessarily the well-rounded nature and caliber of the individual or the applicant, but it's sometimes quite often that the departments are looking for something very particular. And I found this when I was applying for jobs. Now, this is a selling point that Claremont offers, or they used to offer when we were going there, that the philosophy, religion, and theology degree, what we call PRT, within the School of Religion, was the only doctorate degree on the planet that offered all three, which sounds great, except that frequently when I got to interviews, and I don't know if you had this similar experience, department chairs would ask me, so are you a philosopher? Are you a theologian?
Everything you said, I'll basically echo and just add some additional stuff to it. It's the things that were my strength. Yeah, as you said, like I did have a significant amount of teaching experience, but sometimes when you're going for those niche things, if I had gotten some more advice to like publish, articles and stuff more in grad school and push a bit of that, then I probably could have been, quote, more marketable. But then, yeah, as you said, the economic downturn, I was married and still married, going to be celebrating 20 years next year. So, we were a young married couple trying to make ends meet and stuff like that too. do. And so all of that was hard to do. And so, there were other areas where, quote, I could be stronger in that I would have grabbed them. But yeah, there's no doubt that my strengths in my teaching, is really what kept me on at La Verne, and what also got me realistically some of those positions at other places to teach too. But as you said, they are often looking for something niche. It is a challenge. It is difficult to market yourself even in terms of like what it is that you're doing. Yeah, you and I were going through this program around the same time over at CGU, but in a different scenario. You think of like the way your life like has these different pathways and forks in the road. I easily could imagine myself doing something like you're doing had things just gone a little bit differently. Had I not had that teaching gig at La Verne that was so stable for so long, then yeah, maybe I end up, going full force in another direction. There's a real part of me that really envies what you've done and seeing how Middle Tree has grown and the way in which you're serving students from so many different backgrounds and trying to provide the academic and career support that they need at such crucial times in their lives. I love teaching college students, but I found so much value in working with middle school students and high school students and helping them figure out, because there's just so much misinformation out there. People are so uninformed often about what a quote good college is and how to go about finding places. Because people often just think about things like reputation. Oh, I'm going to go to this school. I want to go to UCLA. Well, okay, lots of people want to go to UCLA, but like, why do you want to go? And you realize that it's really the name brand, it's the reputation. But what do you know about the culture there, the community there? Is this an environment where you're going to thrive and you're going to do well and you're going to be supported? For some students, that's exactly the environment they need. It's a place like UCLA. For other students, exactly what we offer at the University of La Verne is exactly what you need. We have classes roughly between 10 to 20 students every semester. I know all of my students on a first name basis. I even go and get coffee with students. I've even had a couple of students that, want to meet with me over the summer to update me about stuff with Zoom meetings, and all that stuff is just precious and amazing, but you're often not going to get that kind of mentorship at a different kind of institution. So yeah, I envy a lot of what you do, and I'm so proud of what you guys have done in my small little role in helping with you guys get started. All of the different ways in which you can be involved in academia from so many different areas and make a difference. So I certainly see how you're all making a big difference in a slightly different way, and yet our paths are also intertwined in a unique way too.
They're very intertwined. And because it's funny that you say that, or maybe not so much because it's such an obvious thing for at least me to see, is that, as I already mentioned, like I thought, why would I want to teach right now? I just had moved to California from New York City. It was total culture shock and was all set and ready and excited about doing this doctorate level work and working with all these awesome people that we got to work with during our time there. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be in a classroom for the rest of my life. I want to just focus on being a student for a little while. And I had just gotten out of a classroom and where I was a student teaching and having a job. Ironically, serendipitously, whatever, because I chose that path, it led me towards Middle Tree, which again, I thought that I was going to take your route, of course. And I'm envious in a lot of ways of the career that you've had, because I think a lot of people bounce around also, especially when you're doing that adjunct kind of run and you're teaching, so many different courses in different colleges all over the place and you're working for peanuts and ingratitude. I think it's rare to have a situation like you got to be at one university for so long and that hard work is finally manifested into all these awesome things that you're now able to do over there. But suffice it to say that if you get into academia at any level, you're going to be able to do something with it if you so choose. Do you ever regret? Probably not, given that you teach this every day, but do you ever regret studying what we studied? And again, just for clarity, we studied philosophy of religion and theology, because a lot of people ask me, what do you do with that? How does that relate to anything professionally or otherwise? Well, first of all, I always say that it helps me think about, like, how will I pay back my student loans? But secondly, that it's informed me as a human being. And I feel like I could walk into more or less any job and be benefited by my education or the experience that I've gotten because of the education that I have. Do you see that in your own life, or do you ever regret doing what we did or not shifting it slightly or doing something else or looking at something else?
I've gotten asked this question so many times. Other friends of mine who have gone into different careers. And one of the things you're committing to if you go into a PhD program is you are postponing that time frame with which you can start to establish yourself in a career and then start getting to that place where you're making more. Exactly, right? Just finishing up PhD work and you're starting to get these jobs and you're kind of starting more at the bottom, whereas some of your people now, they're hitting like the stride of the middle of their career and they're starting to make money and all that kind of stuff. What I generally say is, in terms of choosing a career in which I could make more money, could I have chosen something else? Yes, and I actually think I'm talented enough, so to speak, if I'm patting myself on the back, that, could I have done something else and made more money? Sure. But you took the words out of my mouth, when you were talking about kind of developing as a human being. And in terms of personal development, in terms of my sense of where I am in the world, in terms of my location in a society or a community and how I want to live my life, in terms of just personal growth and personal development and all of that, I wouldn't trade that for anything. It's something about going through that rigorous process of thinking so deeply about things and trying to work out, beliefs and ideas and concepts. There's something about that is really gratifying in terms of just personal growth and personal development, And so when students ask me, because I have a lot of students who will take a class and be so, hey, I really love this, but I'm doing a business degree or I'm doing this kind of degree. Is there any point in majoring in philosophy? And what I tell people is something similar to what you just said, which is, there is not a single job out there that wouldn't benefit from having studied 4 years of philosophy or even getting a master's degree in philosophy. It teaches you how to think. It teaches you how to critically examine things. It teaches you how to find holes in arguments and ideas. It teaches you how to express your ideas in clear, articulate, coherent ways. And there is not a single job where that isn't beneficial. So I often tell people, get a minor in philosophy or do a double major. And now you actually have something different from someone else. I have a double major in this and stuff like that. So I do encourage that to students because I do think it is super practical. I just can't imagine a single job, no matter what it is, where having a background in philosophy isn't in some way useful in thinking things through. In fact, we're actually seeing this ourselves. We're actually looking to, as the Philosophy and Religious Studies Department, to create like a 3-3 program possibly, because we have a law school there where we might be able to have students, who would be finishing their 4th year. They might be starting to work on their law degree because philosophy majors continue to be in the top 3 in testing on the LSAT to get into law school because, it teaches you how to analyze things and to work through stuff. So I don't regret it whatsoever in terms of personal development. I am a much better person. I have no doubt about that. Having gone through that program, even if I make less money in the long run, potentially having gone through the program. It sounds like you agree with that overall assessment.
I do. Yeah, certainly. Because my terrible joke about student loans aside, just as you were saying, not only is there not a job out there where critical thinking and the skills that are given to you from a background in philosophy, where that doesn't become relevant or useful in some way, shape, or form. But I would bring that out to an even further scope and say, pretty much everything within my own life, every situation I come up against is in some way informed by my background in the field. And we also got to work with some really amazing people. And one of whom I believe was on your dissertation committee in Stephen Erickson, correct? Who passed away a couple of years ago. I was in his class on Heidegger. It doesn't really matter if people don't know who Heidegger was. We don't have to necessarily get into that unless we do geek out on him here momentarily. Did you ever take that class with him, the Heidegger class?
I did take that class.
I want to say it was maybe even an undergraduate class. I either audited it or maybe I took it for credit. He brought in a gentleman whose name I forget, but he was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and he had his doctorate degree in that field, and he spoke to us about the importance of philosophy. And what this gentleman had done was, even though he had an established practice, a bunch of patients, all of that, he decided that all of his patients' problems were at root philosophical ones, and that he decided to go back and get a PhD in philosophy as well so that he could better help serve his clientele, which I thought was incredibly also totally pertinent to what we're talking about here, in that everything that you do and encounter in life can at least be helped along by or informed through some sort of philosophical premise or some interpretation or experience or just knowledge about some philosophical topic. But that being said, you have to kind of course, approach everything with the idiosyncrasy and your own bent and slant on it. But if you got taught within the philosophical field properly, you know that you use it as a tool and then you bring your own novelty to it and your own creativity. I wish that academia, especially at the higher levels, encouraged a little bit more is that creative thinking and people's own bents and slants and positions on things. But anyways, suffice it to say that just everything that I do every day, even at Middletree as a CEO, I mean, Middletree itself wouldn't be what it was had I not gotten the background in it, because our whole mission is based off of not only my own experience within academia, but what I came to understand about the nature and structure of it and what we could do to solve it, all of which wouldn't have been possible had I not had the education that I did.
And now the Middletree Minute.
This is Kristen Hernandez, Middletree's executive assistant. Many students think studying means rereading notes over and over, but the real magic happens when they try to recall information without looking. This is called retrieval practice, and it strengthens memory far more than passive review. Parents can help by asking simple quiz-style questions or even turning review time into a family game. For example, after studying vocabulary, cover the words and ask your student to define them from memory. The effort of recalling is what makes the brain stronger, even if they get it wrong at first. And that's the Middletree Minute.
And now a quick look into Dr. Atman's book, A Philosophical War. Joe, last time we talked about changing our minds and our views. So if we do that, how does it actually change us as a person?
I think you have to ask yourself, do you want to change as a person? Probably. Because if you don't, then you just keep doing the things that you do. And yet I think the whole process of being a person, the whole process of being a human being is one of a kind of process in and of itself, or a kind of evolution. It's so hard to do. I'm not saying this is really easy. Last time we kind of talked about erasing or trying to pause all of those things that had happened to you previously, all of the things that you take with you from your previous experiences, your bias, your notions about things, your ideas about things, and how the mind is really responsible for hearkening back to all of that and then trying to digest the present moment through that. So if you're able to approach everything in this novel kind of way, really as if you're seeing everything for the first time, again, very difficult to do. But if you're able to do that, even in just an instant, consciousness is full of simple instances where we're conscious of this, we're thinking about that, we're experiencing that, whatever's in front of us, whatever we're letting into our own consciousness, into our own mind. If we're even able to do that just in moments, what does that do to your view of not only what you're experiencing, but what does that do to who you are? Well, what it does is, again, it allows for this kind of hyper novelty, this kind of novelty that allows things that you weren't aware of into your awareness, into your being itself. Because again, what is your being if not that which you are aware of and those things that you have taken with you from the past? And again, the mind is really this sort of composite of our past occurrences, past ideas, past belief about ourselves, and what we've done with all of those things here presently. So if you can approach every moment with at least some novelty, if it's not hyper novelty, if you can approach every moment, or at least even those simple moments that are right in front of you that you're focused on, if you can recognize, and maybe this is really the first step to doing it, is just recognizing that I'm seeing this through this particular lens because I have this particular information. I maybe, am a mathematician, I'm a scientist, and I see the world through this particular vantage point because of my experiences, because of all the things that I've been informed by. And I take all that information and use it to inform the present moment. If you can get rid of that, then at least in that moment, then what happens is you open yourself up to this bright and brand new experience where basically anything can happen because we're not restraining it via our own previous conscious digestions and filters. And so what happens to you as a person is you just become very open to things. Again, it's not always an easy thing to do, but it's an important exercise to perform, especially in certain instances. Our egos serve such a great purpose in so many ways, but to have too much of those filters up in front of us disallows us to see things truly and really as they are.
Thank you for listening to Educate Everyone with Dr. Joseph Atman and Tammy Trujillo. Join us each week as we explore the inner workings of our own minds and the educational system which builds and supports it. Also, check out our website at middletree.org to see what opportunities Middletree's programs can offer you or your student. And join us on social media. If you have any questions you'd like Dr. Atman to answer, please leave them on a post or send us a message, and you may hear them answered on the next episode of Educate Everyone. Until then, thanks for tuning in.